Good morning. My name is Brian Wheeler, Director of Communications for the City of Charlottesville. Welcome to Cville360, a program to inform and engage the Charlottesville community. During the coronavirus pandemic, the city's leadership knows you want to hear from us frequently about our actions. We also want to hear from you and provide opportunities for engagement. We've launched this program on our streaming sites, Comcast Channel 10, and on a companion Zoom webinar, so you can tune in live and on demand while practicing social distancing. The webinar allows you to join the broadcast and ask questions of our guest. If you want to try the webinar, visit charlottesville.gov/Zoom for the registration information. The link to each show appears at the bottom of the page. At the top of each program, we'll have a brief update on the state of the coronavirus and the city's response. And today we will hear from Deputy Fire Chief Joe Powers, who joins us again via webinar. The remainder of the program will be a discussion with our city manager, Tarron Richardson, who is now passing the one-year milestone in his tenure as our city manager. On the webinar, you can type your questions in the Q&A module. You can also click the raise your hand icon, and I'll bring you onto the program to speak directly to our guest. We're going to start out with Deputy Chief Powers. Let me welcome him to the program. Good morning, Deputy Chief.
Good morning. Good morning, Brian. Did you have a good weekend?
We had a good Memorial Day weekend. I hope you did as well. Of course, we're going to thank Dr. Richardson for the extra day that we had for a 4-day weekend, at least many of us. And I know many in the fire department and police department were not able to take the weekend off. So we appreciate your service.
Oh, I appreciate that too. So good morning, everybody. I'd like to give you a quick update on where we are with the coronavirus here in the community. Again, my name is Joe Powers. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief of Community Risk Reduction for the City of Charlottesville. I am also the city's Incident Commander for the COVID-19 Management Team. That team is made up of multiple agencies throughout the city, and we work with our regional partners with UVA and Albemarle County. We have 5 strategic goals within the city for COVID-19, and that's essentially to provide essential services during the pandemic, protect and support vulnerable populations, protect and support first responders and other direct service providers, sustain our healthcare system by, again, flattening that curve that we've talked about so often, and to prepare and plan for community support, transition, and recovery. So today is May 26th, and using the Thomas Jefferson Health District COVID-19 data portal, which is a long name, but if you do a web search for TGHD data, you can find the same data that I'm referencing here. Overall, the district has experienced 422 total cases in the region, including 19 fatalities. And in the city of Charlottesville, we have had 82 cases, and Albemarle County, 149. When we talk about phase 1 of transition, we all know that we are now in phase 1, and it's called Safer at Home, and that began back on May 15th, which was a couple Fridays ago. In the community, over this long Memorial Day weekend, phase 2 was very successful, and we had no notable complaints from the police department, and everybody cooperated very well with the restrictions that were still in place. From a standpoint of the city of Charlottesville, phase 1, we're still safer at home, and it brings very few in-person services back to the city. So the city hall will remain closed through phase 1. When we talk about new cases and new testing, we did see an increase in free testing over the weekend in the city and some free box lunches for those recipients. At the Mount Zion First African Baptist Church on Langford Avenue, and at the Jefferson School on 4th Street, those were our 2 free testing sites in combination with Martha Jefferson, UVA, and the Health District. Combined capacity of both of those test sites were almost 400 tests. Statewide, we've continued to see a downward trend in the positive COVID-19 tests using that 7-day moving average that we hear a lot about in the media. Looking at the data from the VDH Corona website, you may notice this day-to-day fluctuation in cases almost like stair steps. And those stair steps typically represent the decreased testing on weekends. And you'll see the same decreased testing this weekend. And some of those numbers are a few days behind. So as the data comes in, those graphs are also updated. And just as a reminder, along the lines of the Virginia Department of Health, they're still recruiting to fill 1,300 positions for testing and contact tracers. From a regional standpoint and through regional partnerships, we're developing long-term plans, and in long-term, we're talking 12 to 18 months to house some of the most vulnerable homeless and ultimately find sustainable housing for those people. We're looking at developing plans to feed those most at risk, because likely through phase 3, those populations most at risk will still need to be social distancing. We're also working with continued partnerships with long-term care facilities, and we're developing means to maintain and track and increase supply of personal protective equipment to support the community's need. So lastly, remember that it's still safer to stay at home. If you feel sick, please call your doctor and don't go to work. Keep a safe distance and wear cloth masks when you're in public. Always wash your hands often and with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. So that's all I've got, Brian. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Powers. We do have a question from an audience member on the webinar, and it is as follows. Why are public courts, splash parks, etc., I assume they're referring to tennis courts, being closed at the same time public beer gardens and other restaurant establishments and such are being opened? And the questioner says the CDC and others have stated there's little chance of transmission through inanimate objects, and we're also at lower risk when we're outside. So what might you add as far as the decisions the city's made to restrict access, to our parks and recreational facilities?
So I think I'm going to push that off to Dr. Richardson. I think that there's been some plans in the city to understand staffing and long-term plans to open some of these facilities, and some of them take quite a while to ramp up. But maybe Dr. Richardson has something that he'd like to add to that question.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Yes, that is correct. We have been in discussion with our staff as well as with the City Council to possibly look at reopening some of our facilities. But as always, as you mentioned, we want to make sure that everyone is safe in whatever environment that we provide for the community.
Great. And Deputy Chief Powers, one thing I want to get out there for everyone's benefit is the data you referred to is also available on the city's website at charlottesville.gov/coronavirus. So that's probably the easiest way to remember how to get to the Thomas Jefferson Health District's current dashboard, and you can see all the cases by locality and different demographics about the coronavirus pandemic. Deputy Chief Powers, what can you tell us about the weekend activity, and were there any calls for service that were of concern that you want to talk about?
No, actually, I reached out to the police department over the weekend and again this morning, asking what their experience was with our community and if there was any need for enforcement or need for education in the community. And overall, there was nothing notable from enforcement for the executive order. And the police department has approached all of, in the past, has had plans to approach enforcement issues more with education and partnership with the community, because we're all trying to get a little bit of outside time but still stay safe and healthy. But from this past weekend, with a long Memorial Day weekend, we did not have any notable activities that required enforcement or even education or partnership.
That's really great news. Thank you. And it does seem like our business establishments here in Charlottesville and in the surrounding area are being really cautious and taking their time to make sure that everyone is staying safe. And we do want to encourage people to, keep wearing masks, keep practicing social distancing, all those things that Deputy Chief Powers has said every week on this program. We need to keep doing those things during this phase 1 transition to recovery. Deputy Chief Powers, anything else you want to add before we go?
No, I think I've covered everything. Again, wash your hands. That 20 seconds with soap and water is vitally important. If soap and water is not available, please use a hand sanitizer. And if you're sick, if you're feeling sick, stay at home and call your doctor. That's your best resource. Thank you very much, though.
Thank you, Chief. We hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
The rest of our program will be with our city manager, Dr. Tarron Richardson, who passed a one-year milestone here that was recognized by our mayor, Nakia Walker, at a meeting earlier this month. So welcome, Dr. Richardson, back to the program. You were one of our first guests when we launched Cville360.
That's right.
So thank you for your support of the program. Why don't we get the conversation going? I know you've got a lot you want to share today, but maybe, reflect back a year ago, and you're going through the interview process with the city, which was very public. We had you up on the stage at the Jefferson School, and you were being asked questions by the community even before you got here, right? So tell us, what was that like, and what were you thinking as you transitioned from Texas to Virginia?
It was an experience, I'll say that, having such a public interview process like that. And I think around the country, people will say, well, that's the first time we've really seen something like that. But through that process, it was good for me because I really got a chance to meet people in the community, meet our staff, as well as to hear the needs, wants, and concerns of everybody in the community. And a lot of those relationships that I built from my time during the interview process, I still work with those folks in the community on a day-to-day basis to provide me access to different things that I want to either learn about or want to talk about in terms of getting more involved, more engaged with the community. Now, just like with anything else, it's a process. And sometimes when I talk to people, they say, it seems like you've been here longer than a year. And I say sometimes because of all the issues and the different things that have gone on since my arrival, it seems like I have been here longer than a year.
Yeah, well, a pandemic will do that to you too.
yeah, age you really fast. But the main thing was that, being able to, get a lot of those things accomplished, that people have asked about or have been asking about for years, and being able to get it done what I could within reason, as well as to be able to get out and meet with as many people in the community as I could. Now, I haven't had a chance to meet with everybody, but I think for the time that I've been here, I've done a great job in terms of meeting with a lot of different groups, organizations, associations, and what so have you.
Yep, you've definitely made it clear that your door's open. When somebody speaks at City Council, you're quick to say, let's get together, let's have a phone call. So I definitely would agree with you that you've definitely put yourself out there and been available.
It's just the only thing is that, I try to do it with everyone, but my schedule is booked from maybe 7 in the morning all the way up until late hours at night most times. And then, some emails I can't get to, and I want the public to know that I try, but I get so many emails in a day and trying to get to everybody. Sometimes I can't, so sometimes it takes me a day or two to get back to you, but I try my very best.
Well, and I think that's true of council. I think it's true of senior staff. We all get a lot of email. And I do think that we've built a expectation that we will be responsive and that we have tools and staff in place to help us keep track of those things and make sure that something doesn't fall through the cracks.
Definitely.
And I think that's definitely your expectation of the staff is that we don't let that happen and we stay on top of these things. So.
You're exactly correct.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to remind the audience that you can ask a question of Dr. Richardson by raising your hand in the webinar, or you can type your question in the Q&A module. We're going to go through some slides that Dr. Richardson has prepared and let him talk about his first year of service here in the city, talk about some of the challenges and then some of the plans we have going forward for the city. So Dr. Richardson, we'll start with your cover slide there, and then we'll get right into the meat of it here. Let's show the agenda. And please, go ahead.
Yes, and what I wanted to do was just talk about it, and I look at it as a puzzle because there were some missing pieces prior to me getting here, and I'm trying to put those pieces of the puzzle together. So what I did was wanted to provide you with a quick agenda so you know what we're talking about from the preliminary to the definite. But one of the major things is that, we do have a strategic plan, which the council and I would have been working on if the pandemic did not come. We were looking at this and looking at our overall core values and being able to talk about that in terms of how we were going to progress and move forward with the new council members. and then the overall objectives in trying to achieve those goals. So what I did throughout this presentation is be able to outline a lot of those things within this presentation to be able to talk about our continuous drive and our strive to actually get to achieve those goals. And then I want to talk a little bit too about the lessons learned. And I learned a lot of lessons being here, but like I said before, from me being in the community, talking with different people, and meeting with just about everybody in the community, I was able to learn a lot of different things about the community and how can I move forward in terms of creating that strategic path forward.
Well, let's talk about each of those goals that the city has had. And these were goals from a past strategic plan, that you inherited as our city manager. And as you mentioned, this is something council really wants to have a discussion about. And we have a new council.
Yes.
We have a new city manager.
Yes.
And so everyone wants to, I think, recalibrate the city's strategic plan, especially post 2017.
That's right.
So let's talk about that first goal, which is an inclusive community of self-sufficient residents. And you've got a slide on some of the objectives that we've done on that front.
Yes, and what was great and what we talked about was also too the Unity Days programming, which you did an excellent job. And then also the community with the different programs and events that we had throughout the city. And this summer we were planning to do it again, but with the pandemic, we kind of put that off for now. But I thought it was a great program. I think it's something that we should continue doing, to be able to promote unity within the community. The other thing is, too, when we talk about that within an inclusive community of self-sufficient residents is the programs that we provide, such as, and I'll talk about it a little bit more about economic development as we move forward, but also, too, the Growing Opportunities program. I think that provides a lot of opportunities for folks in our community, and I think more money needs to be put towards that moving forward because of the significance of it, because of what people can gain out of it, and more so not just about employment, but also too earning higher salaries and wages in those positions once you get done with that. And then the Home to Hope program. This was a initiative launched by our mayor, and we continue to fund that. Even with the revised budget, we put $350,000 in it. And then we have, the money for CRHA, the funding for 2021. Although it was a struggle, but as I promised, our folks over at CRHA, as well as the residents, that we will continue funding those dollars to create more affordable housing within their community. And to be able to do that and put the money in there over the next few years so that they can equal out to have that $12 million.
And that's the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority.
Yes.
And what we're embarking on is the redevelopment of the city's public housing.
That's it.
So that's, eventually that will be all of it. But right now it's really a focus on South First Street and Crescent Halls as two of the initial projects, but eventually West Haven and the other projects as well.
That's right, and that's what I wanted to do. And as I talked to many of the public housing residents, and that's why I wanted to make sure that they understand that the money is going to be there and moving into this fiscal year 21. Although we're going through the pandemic and had to make some reductions across the board, we still put money in there to be able to fund that in 21 to get started.
And separately, Friendship Court, which is owned by a nonprofit organization, but that's also receiving support.
Yes, that is correct. And also, too, we've continued to fund the Supplemental Rental Assistance Program to the tune of $900,000 in FY21. We have dedicated staff to work with CRHA. Brenda Kelly and myself, we meet with the CRHA leadership team on Fridays. We have a standing meeting where we can talk about different development issues. We can talk about different things that are going on. We can talk about different ways that we can support them with different initiatives and things like that they have going on. And then I do have that supporting cast with Aaron Etuck as well as John Sales to be able to provide that additional support.
Yep. And that team's going to be meeting today at noon. The Housing Advisory Committee will meet, and John Sales, Aaron Attack will be involved in that. And that's another way that we make sure these dollars for affordable housing get channeled into the key priorities.
And one of the key things that I've talked about with folks when I first got here, going back to that, was how can the city help more with public housing. And what I did as I walked the community with different residents was to talk about the different things that we could do to try to help them to offset some of their capital costs as well as some of their general fund expenditures. And we've been able to do that in terms of providing some capital funds for them to get some infrastructure improvements, especially behind Crescent Halls, as well as to do some things in West Haven as far as with our bucket trucks and things like that. So it's a continuous thing, and I want to make sure that's ongoing throughout my tenure here.
Let's talk about goal 2, which is a healthy and safe city. And obviously the pandemic is what we're focused on right now, but tell us about the other work that's going on.
Well, I can remember when I first got here, we had a small CIM team. And then as we moved on and then the pandemic came, we brought in that to have more involved, our directors and everyone, to be able to provide the necessary services to our community as we deal with this pandemic. And then we talked about a little bit more in terms of our communications and operations. Yes, they did change because for the simple fact is that we now try to, on a daily, whenever we have the show, is to have Chief Powers come and talk about, the different things going on with the pandemic and the ways that we are trying to control it from spreading, and as well as, our city council meetings. Now we do it through Zoom, and that's a different way of us communicating with the public, but also getting the information out, as well as continuing our meetings. Yep. As you can remember, that was a lot of planning that went into that to be able to do that, but your team continues to do a great job.
Well, it was I remember that first night we had to do a council meeting, and at that time, people were still coming to council chambers.
Yes.
And so we had to sort of mark the seats, which ones could be available, and try to create social distancing in that room, while at the same time, making the webinar available. So we're definitely all learning new things here as we go.
And the other thing is, too, when we talk about operations, just, my whole thing is with public services. I wanted to make sure that continues throughout this pandemic because the residents of our community, they expect, the services that we provide. So we've constantly, we haven't had our doors open, so to speak, but we have still been providing those public services to the community in any way that we can. And then one of the other important things is that I like to mention is, although we are going through a tough financial time right now, we are still maintaining our staff. Our staffing levels have not changed, and we still have, our number of employees working throughout the city. And then also, too, lastly, we mentioned Mr. Powers, but I'd like to thank all of our first responders for all of the work they've done since the beginning. And continue to do on a day-to-day basis. It's strenuous, but I think that we're doing a great job in terms of the way that we respond to any calls that come in to the city for service.
If you have a question for the city manager, you can raise your hand in the webinar, or you can click into the Q&A module and type your question right there, and we'll ask it for you. Dr. Richardson, the next goal you wanted to talk about is about the environment, and it's a beautiful and sustainable, natural and built environment.
Yes.
A green city.
Yes, yes. And that's what we want to continue to do. And I got to give a lot of thanks to our team, and I'll be mentioning some of their names throughout this presentation because I think that they do need the shout out as well as the salute for all the work that they've done. But, we've been putting a lot of policies in place in terms of trying to reduce our carbon footprint around the city. And I'd like to thank Crystal Ritterball for being able to do that because it's a tough job when you talk about changing. It's just like my position as city manager. When you talk about changing, the habits of the past, it's hard to go through those changes. But she sticks with it and keeps us, moving in the right direction. Also, too, we continue to put money into, our bike ped and well as our infrastructure. And I'd like to thank Amanda Ponce for still maintaining that and making sure that we're moving forward as a city and making sure that we do have, safe bike ped areas for our residents to enjoy. And yesterday I saw a lot of people enjoying it.
Yep, for sure. And if you haven't looked at our website recently, I know that team has put a lot of effort into making sure that our environmental information is much clear and easy to find. So whether it's composting, recycling, you name it, you can find that on the website.
Yeah. And I'm going to thank you for that in a minute, too, about the website. But also, too, public transit and making sure that is running as smoothly and efficient and effective as possible. And we've hired a new director, Mr. Garland Williams, who came from Richmond and worked with their transit system. And I think that we're moving in the right direction. You know, he has a lot of plans, a lot of things that he's achieved already. You know, just dealing with the collaboration with our other partners that deal with transportation. And I also like to thank Ty Brown for maintaining, you know, our overall our paved trails as well as our nature trails. That's a big job. He started here one day, and then on the next day, he became the interim director. So he has picked up quickly on how we operate, and Todd has been a great addition to our city. And then the recycling facilities, you know, I like to talk about Marty Zillman, the work that he continues to do to try to make that happen, as well as, you know, once again with Chris Engel and promoting the green tourism. And people always say, well, what is green tourism? Well, you know, that's, you know, when you have the green certifications in terms of, you know, our hotels and our restaurants and our breweries and whatso have you, where, you know, they have initiated those green policies, which helps to sustain our environment. So we're working in many different ways and trying to, you know, spruce things up and make sure that we are living in a green community.
Yeah, and clearly our residents demand that. I mean,
Yes.
before the pandemic, that was certainly one of the top topics that people would bring to a public meeting with council, was focused on climate change.
That's
and
it.
what is the city doing. And while our residents are taking their own steps to reduce their carbon footprints, certainly the city as a big employer, you know, a company with a lot of buildings.
That's right.
You know, we have a big footprint, and we run transit, we run a gas utility. All those things impact the environment as well.
That is correct.
So let's talk about the economy. Goal 4 is a strong, creative, and diversified economy.
Yep. And I know that we have a lot of things going on, and I'll give a lot of credit to Chris Engel, who runs our economic development department, for putting a lot of these things together. And one of the programs that I think that had been very successful here was the ACE program, which is Advancing Charlottesville Entrepreneurs. Although we're not accepting applications at this time, we will be moving forward with that again after July 1st. But what that does basically provide new businesses with less than 6 months with $500 grants, as well as existing businesses who have been in business longer than 6 months with up to $1,500 grants. And then also too, with our, you know, our new business development, we want to make sure that we're increasing job opportunities for our residents to be able to have a place of employment once these buildings are built, but just to bring those buildings here and then provide those opportunities. The Business Recovery Fund, the microloan, you know, to help businesses restart. So we're doing our part in terms of COVID-19 and the impact that it has on our businesses, but also too to provide businesses with up to $10,000 in loans. And that's what our joint agreement or joint partnership with the county's EDA, as well as the administrators of the CIC, which is the Community Investment Collaborative. And then also too, the one last thing I want to talk about is growing opportunities. And what this is basically a program for low-income residents with training, providing them with training opportunities. And I want to make sure that, you know, although we get grants and we put money into the Workforce Development Fund, I want to make sure that we can continuously add additional funding to be able to provide more programs, more opportunities for training, to provide people with opportunities for jobs.
Yep.
Yep.
And Goal 5 is a well-managed and responsive organization, and we were just talking about being responsive a few minutes ago.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, tell us what you're thinking here.
We've done a lot of work in terms of that, in terms of realigning our portfolios and a reporting structure. We do have a finance and administration side as well as operations side. We wanted to create our new structure in terms of having deputies and assistant director positions. We also, and I'll give you a shout out for this one, is the overhaul of the city website and web applications. We've talked about that many times. And then throughout my interview process, people talked about that in terms of us having an antiquated website. So I thank you and your team for being able to put that together. And to the public, I know that we still have, you know, some things to make in terms of improvements, but we'll continue to do that, you know. But this is a welcome addition to our city, our website. And then also to the implementation and funding of the Civilian Review Board, which I put about $150,000 in there for the FY21 budget. And then diversity in workplace. We want to make sure that staff and management are more representative of the population that we have here. The hiring of managers in terms of, giving guidance on equitable hiring practices, making sure that, I talk to all the directors in terms of how do we go about hiring staff and, understanding the equity lens of that and not just looking at one ethnicity for those hires. And then moving forward, we're working on now, we just got in the job description with pertaining to hiring a director for diversity and equity and inclusion. So that's underway. And then also too, overall creating a department of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then also adding underneath of that is the division of human rights. So we're trying to put it together and put a nice plan in place to be able to have that structure.
And 1 year in, obviously you've learned some lessons. You probably had some challenges you didn't expect.
Definitely.
But you've also had, these accomplishments that you've just run through. But, highlight some of the key lessons learned over the past 12 months.
That's right. One of the things that, I always talk about too, and I've learned a lot about is race, healthcare, education, and the disparities within the African American community. And I continue to learn more as I talk to more people throughout the community. The other thing is the lack of low income housing, because for the simple fact is I had to understand the difference between low income and affordable housing. Because what is affordable? Affordable is only affordable to, some people. But what do we do in terms of providing that housing for low income families and making sure that they do have housing? And then race disparities in departments in terms of management and leadership positions. We've done that. I think we'll continue to transform that in terms of what it looks like around the table, in terms of what our leadership teams look like, as well as the management and other supervisory levels throughout the city. And we have to continue to work and push for that. But it's something that we've been working on and we continue to do. To the disbursement of capital projects in the city. We look at some areas that got more in terms of capital projects done than other parts of the community. So we want to make it an equal disbursement of funds to be able to do capital projects in the city. And then making sure the condition of our city facilities. We talk about that all the time. We have employees who are housed outside of City Hall because we don't have the room or even the conditions of our buildings right now. And then bringing everyone together. I talked about in the beginning in terms of doing a space study and talked about how can we bring more together, because if you look at other cities, they have a consolidation of different services in one building that's on a transportation corridor. So what I was looking at is putting schools as well as the police department and City Hall all in one facility, which will reduce our cost in terms of our overall maintenance issues and different things like that. And then it'll basically reduce our overall expenditures, because what we do now is basically do patchwork on our facilities. Transportation, I want to make sure that it goes back into minority communities. That's a key driver, and Garland is working to try to make sure that happens. I want to and make sure that we engage more residents across the spectrum in terms of socioeconomics. And being able to provide them with opportunities to have, put a word into the conversation, be able to speak to issues more, and being able to provide them with more access.
And I know the comprehensive plan is one opportunity coming up where we have consultants who are really focused on that. How can we get people who wouldn't ordinarily participate?
That's right.
Helping give us feedback about our comprehensive plan.
That's right. And then the last item, another key lesson I learned is just basically the distrust between the police and the community. And how do we build that bridge? And that's what I want to continue to do, to try to work with the community to try to build that bridge.
So any city manager coming in and seeing those sorts of challenges in a community would have their hands full.
That's it.
And then you had a pandemic on top of that.
That's what slowed things down.
But I think we are a resilient community. We certainly learned that in 2017. And we're certainly seeing that as we move through the pandemic as well. In the time we've got left, we've got about 10 minutes left for our audience. If you have a question you want to ask, you can click the raise your hand icon in the Zoom webinar, or you can type your question in the Q&A module, and I'll be happy to ask Dr. Richardson your question.
And if not, we'll keep on talking.
We will keep on talking. And You wanted to touch on some work in progress on some of these major issues that we're doing to make progress.
Yes, yes. And as you can see on the screen that you're looking at, like I said before, we're going to maintain that funding for public housing, as well as provide funding for supplemental rental assistance. And then also too, I'm going to keep my team together, and we're probably going to build on that to be able to provide more assistance in the community. I think that in the end, we'll probably create a department, internal department of housing, to be able to provide more assistance to CRHA, and then to look at other affordable housing opportunities throughout the community. And then to continue to provide those in-kind services to CRHA, because we're partners in this and we have to work together. And then two, we talked about transportation, and then looking at overall things within the community. We were able to do something that was part of my work plan, was standards and design manual. We got that going. We hired a director of CAT, which was a need when I came in. More funding in the budget, which we were going to do before we hit the pandemic, was put more funding in for full-time employees for the CAT, for our CAT system. And that's very important for our residents. And then we provided funding for transportation projects in the tune of $14.4 million in the FY21 budget. So we're still moving forward.
Yep. And as part of the budget process, which is still underway, June 1st is when we expect council to adopt the budget for the next fiscal year. Ordinarily, that would have been done a long time ago.
Right.
But education funding is a key part of that budget. I mean, that's the biggest chunk of the city's budget, is to support education.
And as you can see, the city council, as well as myself, we still support that, and we want to make sure that we continue to do that. It's challenging times right now, but as always, Dr. Atkins and I, we work together to try to make sure that we make it through in terms of our budget. And as you can see there, we still have $3 million in bondable projects for them, as well as $200,000 in other bondable projects that we have, as well as a proposed allocation of 58.7, and then also to providing them with funding for the gifted teachers. The comprehensive plan update, we're still moving forward. We're working with RHI with doing our overall comprehensive plan, as well as our zoning rewrite, as well as talking about the housing strategy, which we can then go about creating that land bank that everyone has been talking about for a while now. And then, as I talked about too, through the interview process, we talked about the land bank. And then the public engagement, as I said before, that's one of the things I want to continue to work on. I've done my best in terms of trying to meet with many different groups, organizations, and individuals throughout the city. I will continue to do that. I need more time. So the folks who I haven't met with, that will be what I will be doing within my second year here within the city. And then two, to talk about the facilities plan improvements and consolidate buildings moving forward, looking at how we can do that, as well as decrease our overall expenditures. And then also two, one of the things that's very important to our employees is the compensation study. We are going to put a hold on that due to COVID-19 right now, but that was one of my main goals, was to be able to look at the compensation study and make sure that everyone is paid equally and fairly throughout the city.
And one of the new hires you made coming on board was as a new our new HR director, Michelle Vineyard.
Yes.
And she has certainly championed this compensation study. Help the public understand why that's important, why we need to benchmark different positions against different localities and things like that.
Yeah, because we still want to continue to hire the best, but we don't want to always be competing with surrounding communities and losing these good people that come into the city. But also, too, I want to create something that's fair and equitable, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of your gender, everyone is paid fairly and equally, and that's what we want to make sure of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great.
And then moving forward, we're still working on our human resources policies and procedures. We're working day and night to try to get that done. And then also, too, we want to continue to invest in our employees as far as providing them with training and different things like that. Because the main thing, what I want to see is making sure that people are able to cross-train or apply for other departments throughout the city where they see opportunities. I don't want them to just, look at it as a glass ceiling. I want to make sure everybody has the necessary skills to be able to move to different areas throughout the city. And what that does, that enhances our overall output.
Yep, that's great. Well, then a quick summary of some of the key initiatives related where you've really taken action, you've done a policy, you've given direction to staff. You've got some highlights here on those.
Yes, and I'll just go through those quickly because I know we're running out of time fast. The zero-based budgeting model, I want to thank our revenue and budget teams, especially Chrissy and Ryan, for their hard work and due diligence, as well as the other individuals who serve on those teams to be able to get this budget done. As I said before, we were preparing for FY21 and about to adopt it. Then we had to go back and revise it because of COVID-19. And once we get out of this phase, in a few more months, we're working on FY22. So it's been a real big challenge in terms of moving forward. But other things I want to make sure that we do have is, our credit card policy, looking at putting that in place, as well as, make sure that we continue to be accountable for our expenditures. And especially during this time, COVID-19, we got to be really careful about our overall expenditures. So all the directors are working through that, and they're working with one another to be able to make sure that we are on track. I want to make sure that we continue to focus on the services being provided by employees and making sure that making sure that the residents are receiving what they require, and that's great public services. And then I talked about a civilian review board, putting money in there, $150,000, to talk about the accountability piece, as well as centralizing our functions, because before departments were able to order different equipment and different things like that by department. Instead of having one centralized focus where we know where our expenditures are going, what we're purchasing, and then to get them true lifespans about when we need to replace them.
Yep. And before we go to the last slide, maybe talk to the public about this annual evaluation process that you're going through. And City Council's having some closed meetings this week. So those are on our calendar, and we know Council's meeting not just to talk about you and your performance, but also the other staff they work with, city attorney, the council clerk.
Yes.
So Council does that as part of their normal business. But where are we in that process, and how does that shape your plans moving forward?
I think that will be able, I've had one already with the council who left, the 3 members who left, and now I'm having my second one in a year with the new council members. I guess you can look at it as a way to look at the services or what I have provided to the community, as well as to our internal staff over the last 6 months. And then to talk about it in terms of looking at ways that I can improve in certain ways. And then me to be able to communicate to the council, about my feelings, concerns, and issues that I'm having to be able to achieve those overall goals. But as you can see, the strategic plan, we've achieved a lot of those things, and we continue to do it. We're meeting our core values in terms of, leadership, accountability, and those things we're mastering. So there's different things that we continue to do, and I think that we've been very successful over this past year since my arrival. But as always, I could never do it without our employees working beside me, and I couldn't do it without the council working in collaboration with me to try to achieve those goals, as well as things that I want to achieve as city manager within the organization.
And let's put that last slide up just so we can get it on the record here on the program. But these are some of those bullet points that you've talked about in the course of reviewing this past year, but this is the strategic plan forward as you see it.
Yes, and I think that these are very important. I think that we need to continue to look at these various areas and continue to focus on them. And I'm gonna do my very best to continue to make sure that we are implementing those things and running the very best, I'll say the most efficient and effective city that we can.
Dr. Richardson, thank you for doing this year in review.
Yes.
And we appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
Yep. Our next show will be in 1 week on Tuesday, June 2nd, and we will review the June 1st City Council meeting. Please contact me with feedback and ideas for future topics, and please stay healthy.